If you've been selling cars for a while, you know better than anyone that the competition in the Renault Alliance, Encore, Fuego, and Renault Sport Wagon segments of the market is nothing short of fierce. Chances are most of the prospects that come in to look at your Renaults are also considering at least one or maybe several competitive vehicles. In those situations, you not only have to know the strengths of your cars, but you have to know both the strengths and weaknesses of the competition. To help you do a better job in selling against competition, we've asked automotive writers from Road and Track, Motor Trend, and Car and Driver magazines to look at our cars versus the competition. We videotaped hours of commentary, and if we had time, we'd like to show it all to you. However, because of the limited space on this video disc, and your time is valuable, we've selected what we consider to be the key competitive points for you to know about each car. At the end of each commentary, we asked the writers to put themselves in your shoes and tell us what points they'd make with a customer in order to sell them off the competitive car and onto one of ours. It's our feeling that this type of information and insight will go a long way toward helping you develop a competitive selling strategy to use on the sales floor. Now, I don't want to mislead you into thinking that this video disc contains all the answers to successful conquest selling. We're giving you some key elements of the competitive story, and there's more to be found by reading your Buyer's Challenge consumer piece and by getting out and learning about the competition firsthand. By that I mean you've got to actually go out and drive the competition. Make notes, and then compare your impressions with those offered by our writers. Remember, your customer is trying to make an intelligent decision. And if you know both your product and the competitors, you're going to find yourself in a better position to have a very convincing sales argument for your Renault. Plus, by utilizing the video disc's ability to access specific comparisons in this program, you'll be able to support your sales story with the observations and candid comments of people who make their living analyzing and testing automobiles. Your knowledge, the Buyer's Challenge piece, plus the use of this disc in the selling situation as a kind of third-party endorsement will make for a very strong selling combination. Okay, enough introduction. Let's get started.
Very straightforward car. 1500cc transverse front-wheel drive. It's pretty much standard new front-wheel drive small car. From an appearance standpoint, I think it's best to describe it as clean but terminally boring. It's just there's not much to look at. It's a classic example of a Japanese version of the old Cutlass. It's a right down the middle of the road car, and when you look at that segment of small, reasonably priced front-wheel drive small, I guess they're really subcompacts, it's right down the middle in every case. Well, the Sentra has some advantages. The light weight of the vehicle from a handling standpoint make it feel extremely nimble. Now, they dilute a lot of that effect by putting what I would consider a very poor base level tire on the entry-level model and on the intermediate level, which is the Deluxe or the DX. The ride on the car is relatively firm, mainly because low vehicle weight, they assume you're going to be putting people in it, so they firm up the suspension, give you a little bit more capacity without bottoming out. When you think about it, really, ride is probably the Alliance's strong point. The car rides like a vehicle that's much larger without feeling ponderous. There's nothing like it, I don't think, in that segment. It's definitely the ride leader. The Alliance also, even in, for example, L form, has better wheels and tires, and you can make an upgrade at the factory level. You can go up to a 175 tire, which is not available on the Sentra. From a comfort standpoint, the Alliance has some pluses because of its long wheelbase, because the rear seat is as large as it is. And on a four-door especially, you have a much better accessibility than in the four-door Sentra. If you're talking about someone looking at a 5-speed 1.7 or a 1.5-liter gas Sentra, you're going to find the 1.7 is smoother, it's quieter, more available torque, much more pleasant to drive in spite of the extra weight of the Alliance. So it's a good combination there, I think, in that segment. With an automatic, I think there are probably 11 million places I'd rather be than in a Sentra. It's just real unpleasant, and it's a 3-speed, so it's revving kind of high. And it's one of those cars where, let's say you're rolling at 35 miles an hour and you put your foot in it, the car doesn't accelerate so much as it gathers momentum. And it makes a lot more noise. But eventually you'll get up to some higher speed, although who knows how long it could take. Well, the 1.7 with the automatic in the Alliance is a very, very good combination. It's tough to criticize the quality of construction on the Sentra. I would say the weak point is the selection of a lot of materials, especially in the interior. The car has sort of this look that it came from a chemical laboratory inside. If you park it in the sunlight, it smells like it came from a chemical laboratory. The vinyl is not especially pleasant. And if you compare, let's say that with a DL, an Alliance DL, the interior quality, the perceived interior quality, is much higher on the AMC product, due mostly to the fact that they're using much better materials inside. Then again, even on the base Alliance, and then you look at an entry-level Sentra, the Sentra has a lot more bare metal showing. It just is not finished as well. So if you're talking about the perception of quality from a standpoint of offering a more complete package, there's definite advantage on the AMC side.
Okay, you've heard his competitive analysis. Now we come to the key question. What points should you make to sell a prospect off the Nissan Sentra and onto an Alliance or Encore?
If I were a salesman and someone had come in looking at a Sentra and they were specifically interested in hatchbacks, the Encore has a definite advantage, and that's that the hatchback version of the Sentra is, they call it sporty, but it really isn't. It's a reduced height sort of hatchback coupe. It's a two-door, not very much headroom. The Encore is basically a four-door sedan with the convenience of a hatch in the back, or a two-door. So there's a plus there from a room standpoint. Now the advantage this car has in interior volume also carries over to the Alliance, because even the four-door sedan version of the Sentra does not have anywhere near the interior volume of the Encore or the Alliance. So there's a definite plus there from a selling standpoint. Another one is the fact that the vehicle is physically larger, which for some people is going to be a plus. Other people may not consider that a plus, but the ride can help win them over, I think. Plus, if the car has the optional wheel tire package, the handling of the Encore or the Alliance is extremely nimble, and it's much better than what you're going to find on a base Sentra, unless the dealer, the competitive dealer, has done a wheel and tire upgrade on the car. The engine performance with the 1.7 is superior, there's no doubt about it. With the 1.4, it would be a tough sale, because there's going to be a compromise in performance. If it's a 1.4 automatic against a Sentra automatic, neither is going to be especially pleasant, but there will be a definite plus for the Sentra because the car's lighter weight. And then again, another one is perceived quality. If someone is looking at fits and finishes, it's possible the Nissan will have an advantage. If they're looking at things like the finishing of the interior, and you can get your buyer to look at an L or a DL, in the case of the Alliance, you're going to have a definite plus there because the car just has a more finished, more complete look.
The Ford Escort is a formidable competitor. It's not the, I think it may have just lost its title as the largest selling car in America, but it doesn't miss it far, and it's certainly in the top two. And there's some excellent reasons for this. The car is, as nearly as anyone can tell, is bulletproof. It doesn't excite a great deal of motion when you look at it, but you get in it and you drive it and you drive it, and 30,000 miles later you probably had to go to the dealer for about an hour. The maintenance schedule on the car is incredible. It's one of the first examples of a car that the Americans are able to teach the Japanese a thing or two. We're looking at two cars that are in design not that far off. They're both four-wheel independent suspension cars, which means that the handling is going to be pretty close in feel. The Ford engineers have given a great deal of attention to handling these days, and they've come up with a nice product. But I think the same is true of the Alliance, because it's a product of a country and an area, Western Europe, where handling has been awfully important for an awfully long time. We Americans are sort of late comers to this. So the difference that you'll find is the difference between French cars and German cars, let's say. That is that you're going to have a softer feel in the Alliance, and you're going to have a little more of a stiffer feel in the Escort, and you might feel that it's a better handling car. I'm not really sure it is. I think it's just a difference in the feel that's communicated to the driver. And I would think from a sales standpoint, it's probably easier to sell a customer on the softer feel than it is the stiffer feel, depending on, it wouldn't hold true for the enthusiast customer, but for the mainstream customer, where one would suppose most of the Alliance prospects lie. The engine in the Escort, I don't suppose, could be much more reliable. It's a fine little four-cylinder engine. The manual transmission and the automatic transmission that come with the cars, however, the matchup I don't find as rewarding as I probably should. Again, there's a too wide a ratio in the manual. You'll find that maybe second gear is really nice, but then there's an awfully big gap to third, and it's worse when you're coming back down through the gears. You pick up a gear where you need a little help, and it's not there. It's like you may as well not have left the higher gear to begin with. The automatic is just, I remember renting an Escort. It wasn't an Escort, it was a Lynx, which is the Mercury equivalent. And at the proper angle on a grade and at the proper speed, the shifter will just start back and forth. I don't know that they've got that out of there yet. So in overall terms, while with the proper sized engine and the manual transmission, you can drive the Escort just fine. It takes a little bit of effort, but if you wanted a comfortable car for in-town driving, and by comfortable I mean you just don't have to give a lot of attention to your driving, I think the Alliance with that automatic transmission, to me, works a little bit better. Interior in the Alliance, when compared to the Escort, the best thing that I can say is that it's the difference between French automobiles and German automobiles, if you will. The Alliance is just a little softer edges, and it does it without sacrificing the necessary utilitarian aspects of a proper interior. That is, instruments that you can read and controls that you can reach, and certainly the French are no stranger to ergonomics either. They're in fact, if that's a word that I guess we've all overused, but ergonomics means no more than things being where they ought to be. And I think when you sit in an Alliance, you don't find many things that are where they're supposed to be. I can't think of one offhand.
We asked William to tell us what points he'd make to convince a competitive shopper to buy an Alliance or Encore over the Ford Escort.
Okay, if I were a salesman at the AMC dealership and I was trying to sell someone off of an Escort and into an Alliance, I think there two things come to mind that I would try and use. The Escort's a tough competitor, but if you take the two of them and say, here's equal engines, pushing aside the GT and versions that don't exist in the Alliance, the car is going to have a more positive drivability quotient, if I could create a complicated term. It's going to be easier to drive. You're just going to be able to go down the road at the speed you want to go easier than in the Escort. It just doesn't create any big fuss. But the strongest point I think the Alliance has is the cleanliness of the styling. After it's all said and done, everyone cares a great deal about how they look in their car. And the Escort, for all of its sales successes and for all of its practicality and for all of the good things about it, has about it the air of the Volkswagen Bug to me. And while Bugs were cute when they came along, I think that's been an awful long time ago now, and quite frankly, the styling on the Escort I think is just dated. You look at it and look at the two cars beside each other. One looks big and not terribly sleek to use an overused Detroit word. And you look at the Alliance, and it just is a doggone nice, clean-looking package. And the styling, to me, and the additional help that apples and apples engines, the additional help the Alliance gets from the electronic fuel injection, I think makes about as good a case as you're going to make. It's not an easy, that won't be an easy conversion to do that. But I do think, though, when you look at the two cars, there's just no comparison in appearance.
Corolla is pretty much the prototypical Japanese economy car. It doesn't have a whole lot of power. It doesn't handle real well. It comes with pretty much the bottom of the line rubber. It's essentially Japanese rim protectors for tires. Front wheel drive, 5-speed gearbox, and it's aimed at the mass consumer, the kind of people who use cars as appliances. I would compare the Alliance a lot more favorably with the Corolla. For one thing, well, the Alliance won the Motor Trend's Car of the Year, and that should tell you something right there about how it compares to other cars in that market segment. The Alliance has got a better suspension. It's a much better driving car. It's a lot more comfortable. As far as base level of equipment, I think it's a lot higher than the Corolla is for the price. Plus the fact that you can get the Alliance and the Encore in with two engine displacements, either 1.4 or 1.7 liter engine, something that can't be said for the Corolla. With the 1.4, you're trading performance for economy. And actually, if I were to buy one of those, I wouldn't buy it with a 1.4. I would just buy it with a 1.7, and it's probably one of the better and the cheapest options around. The seats are much better on the Alliance. The ergonomics are a lot better. I think the overall sound insulation is better on the Alliance. It's quieter to ride, and it's got those terrific pedestal seats, which I think are great. They free up a lot of room in the back for rear seat passengers' feet. The Alliance rides a lot better. It was originally faulted, well, not really faulted, but it has a very typical French ride quality, which means a very soft ride, real good bump absorption, and fairly cushy seats, which are all very typically French. The Corolla, on the other hand, is typically Japanese in that respect. It's a little harsher, chatters, and that's by virtue of its tires and suspension design. The Alliance rides like a much bigger car. It's deceptive in that way. It's a small car, it's light, and it's nimble. They're about the same weight as the Corolla. The Alliance is about the same weight as the Corolla, yet the Corolla drives like a tin box. As far as the engines go, the Corolla does have one advantage in the engine. It has an overhead cam, whereas the Alliance still has a push-rod engine. Which means that the Corolla can rev a little bit higher and probably just a tad smoother, or feel a little bit smoother than the Alliance does. But even that, I think, is a little deceptive because the Alliance motor is a much newer design. And an example of that is that the Corolla engine, even though it does have an overhead cam, still uses a carburetor, whereas the Alliance has a throttle body fuel injection system, which means that the fuel is metered a lot more efficiently. You're only using the fuel you need, makes cold starts better, hot starts, and so on. There's really no excuse these days anymore to have a carburetor on an engine. I mean, it's 10-year-old technology at this point. And of course, the throttle body fuel injection system is not as good as a full port injection system, but it's a good step in that direction. Of course, in California, the port injection is available on the Alliance. As far as response goes, I think the Alliance motor is a little bit more responsive, and I think it's got a better gearbox than the Corolla does. The Corolla's gearbox is notchy and hard to shift compared to the Alliance. One thing I noticed about the Alliance when they were first introduced is the quality of the paint was a lot better than anything we'd ever seen in an American car. and it's significant by its lack of orange peel. The same can't be said for the Corolla. I think the Japanese have made orange peel a science. They go out of their way to try and make it look that way. The Alliance interior is again typically French, which means very comfortable. The French have although the car is built in the U.S., it's a French design car, obviously. And the French have a high priority. Interior comfort is one of the higher priorities they have. And I think the seat design, for instance, is one of the best of any car in that class. There's the pedals, the seats, you can rock, adjust forward and aft, and tilt the seat back. The rest of the interior is much higher quality for a car of that class. The Japanese, the Corolla, for instance, still looks like an economy car, whereas the Alliance does not. It looks like a car that should cost at least as far as interior appointments go, and the quality of the materials, it looks like it belongs in the next class up.
Okay, let's see what Tony would say if he were a salesman facing a customer who's also looking at a Corolla.
Well, if I was a salesman, the thing I would stress most to a potential customer is the higher level of technology and engineering that is in the Alliance as compared to the Corolla. The Alliance is a much newer design car. It has a lot of engineering and technical features which are better than anything else on the market. For instance, the coaxial torsion bar rear suspension. It's a technological innovation. The fact that it has a port injection system as opposed to a carburetor on the Corolla. The fact that the car is faster 0 to 60 and quarter mile with the 1.7 liter engine. The fuel economy is about the same by virtue of the fact that it does have an injection system as opposed to a carburetor. Interior volume is slightly greater, and the level of standard equipment is greater in the Alliance as opposed to the Corolla. Also, overall, it's a better driving car. It's a much more comfortable car to live with in the long haul.
Omni and the Horizon, I think, lend real meaning to the term basic transportation because they're pretty basic cars. I don't find them bad cars, but I don't find them good cars. They're in that gray porridge area of automobiles that are, if the grocery stores sold generic automobiles on the same aisle where they sold generic beans and generic cigarettes, the Omni and the Horizon would be in there with a plain label on them saying car, I think. In comparing the Alliance with the Omni Horizon, again, we're looking at cars that are not terribly different. They're four-wheel independent suspension. They're front-engine, front-wheel drive subcompacts. And then having said that, I think there are some very big differences. The drivability, and again, this is just the way the engine and the transmission works to produce a comfortable, responsive driving experience, I think is infinitely better on the Alliance. That's one. Two, the interiors of the cars are poles apart. The Alliance interior is properly designed ergonometrically. It's a modern, up-to-date car in just about every way. The Omni Horizon, however, was, again, it was a latecomer, remember, or it's something of a holdover car. There is a situation in that car that defies belief. They got far enough to put the magic stalk on there that has all of the controls, but what they also did over on the left-hand side of the car, they went down under the dash and they put the rear dash. It's pretty easy.